All right. Howdy, y'all, and welcome back to Sacred Axis, a space for the whimsically divine. I'm Chesten.
And I'm Christina. And so today I wanted to talk about, so we're getting close to Arbor Day. Arbor Day is all about the trees. Yeah. So that comes, I think it's May 24th. So I wanted to talk a little bit today on, I read a couple books and actually watched a couple documentaries, and it's The Wisdom of Trees and What Lies Beneath the Soil. It's really like scientific research that these forest ecologists have been doing. So I just wanted to kind of expand on that and just see what the kind of this new research is like explains the true connectedness that trees actually have underneath the soil. It's fascinating. So what was that?
That's an awesome topic. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Because I love trees. For generations, humans have looked at trees as symbols of strength and of resilience. And trees root themselves deeply into the earth while reaching up towards the sky. And they endure storms, seasons, droughts, and centuries of change. But modern ecological research is revealing something far more profound. And then forests are not simply groups of trees growing next to one another. They are a complex and deeply interconnected communities. And as much as this connectedness happens, it happens underneath the forest floor. So many people were first introduced to this idea through the book, The Hidden Life of Trees, by German forest Peter Wohlerben, where he describes forests as living social networks where trees cooperate and support one another in ways we once believed were impossible. And much of this connectedness happens underground. Wallenberg spent a decade managing forests in Germany and began noticing something that challenged the traditional ways that forestry science had described trees. So beneath that forest floor exists a vast network of fungal threads known as mycelium. And these microscopic filaments were weaved through the soil and attached to the tree roots, forming partnerships called mycorrhizals. And this relationship is mutually beneficial. So the fungal extend the reach of the tree's roots, allowing the trees to access more water and the nutrition from the soil. In exchange, the tree shares sugars created through photosynthesis. But the mycorrhizal network does far more than exchange nutrients. It connects the entire forest. So within these networks, the trees support one another unconditionally, and the weak are supported by the strong. They together can regulate the microclimate. So the trees can actually regulate the microclimate by lowering the air temperature. So trees love it cool and moist, and they look out for one another. And it's not just the same species of trees, but it's all species of trees. So you could have a Douglas fir, you could have a birch, you could have pine. They all interweave and network together. So research by forest ecologist Susan Samar, described in her book, Finding the Mother Tree, revealed that trees are linked together through those underground fungal networks in ways that resemble an ecological internet. Through this network, the trees share the carbons and nutrients and chemicals signals to one another. And the forest is alive within that communication. So in Samar's research, she showed that when a tree is stressed, perhaps from drought, insect attack, or disease, it can send chemical signals through that mycorrhizal network to the neighboring trees, and they receive messages and begin activating their own defenses. So if a tree gets infected by an insect is invading that, it sends communication through those network systems to alert and alarm the other trees like, hey, put your defenses up. Yeah. So they can be on guard if those insects would come through. It's super fascinating. So the forest literally warns itself. Rather than competing aggressively for resources, the trees appear to be supporting one another through those mycorrhizal networks. And what we'll see is the older trees, they will help the younger ones survive. And trees grow together in a forest, and they often live longer than trees planted in isolation. So when you see, and I noticed this, I even noticed this last night when I was driving in town, like when you'll see on the highway, they just redid the sides and kind of gutted it, and they took out a bunch of trees, and then they're like, hey, let's pretty it up and just put some shrubs. They're like all brown and all dead because they have no network, because it was totally taken out when they started that construction. So they're trying to make these little trees now survive on their own. So you have 20 different little trees spanned out. Who's watching over them? There's no mycorrhizal network underneath of that. And so when those trees grow together, In that mycorrhizal network system, injured trees were sometimes kept alive for decades, sustained by their neighbor ones, which is like, even if a tree is cut down and you just see a stump in the roots, if there's a strong mycorrhizal network system, they are those roots, because that's where our tree really lives, is in our roots. Like, they just can't photosynthesize anymore because they have no leaves. But that whole mycorrhizal network system will still keep that tree alive. It's amazing. Like, I seen this stump and it's like, you'll see it and it's like green and mossy. It could be decaying on top, but the real life of it is in the roots, and everyone's just still sustaining it and giving it energy, giving it nutrients. Amazing. So forests might actually function more like a cooperative community than a competitive battlefield. Like I said, like the Douglas fir, they may send information or nutrients to what a birch may need. So they're always in constant communication because, like I said, they're survival for all of them. There's no separation.
Do they mention if it's a combination? Not kind of a combination of both. The only reason I say that is I know that when a tree gets so big, depending on, I guess, the species, like it's difficult for other trees to grow close to them. Did they ever mention any of that or?
Yeah, and I'll talk a little bit here about mother trees. And mother trees are kind of, now I'm like, after reading these books and watching documentaries, I'm looking now for the mother tree.
Mhm.
It's fascinating. But yeah, so if there is a larger tree, there is no, I want to say negativity. There is not one trying to outshine another. What they're trying to do is make it survive. So the forester in Germany, Peter Walleben, he has this amazing, and it's pretty much close to its natural existence. Before they did a lot of clear cutting a lot in Germany, but this one is pretty close to original with only a few trees that were taken out. But what he said he noticed in there is, like, they have these beech trees. They're very tall. So this beech tree forest, very tall. The mother will disperse her little seedlings. The mother, what she'll do is she will actually stunt the light. She will actually block the light to only allow 3% of the light to come through towards her seedlings. And she does that in order for them to have to move forward and reach for that sunlight, because the straighter they are, the sturdier they are. So the sturdiness will help them with the wind and storms like that. They do this on purpose, is to, like, hey, I'm not going to move a leaf over or a branch over. You have to, for your survival. I'm giving you the best chance for survival by blocking out all but 3% of the sunlight so you can reach towards the sky.
That's so interesting. So it's like a type of tough love, almost like either you're going to reach up here or you're not, but this is the only way you can realistically survive in this forest with, like you were saying, with the weather conditions and sunlight and stuff like that. Like, you have to do this in order to survive. So,
Yep.
you're
Yep.
either going to make it or you're not.
Yeah, it's like the mother tree will set her seedlings up for success. Like, even in these mycorrhizal systems, they notice their own kin, and they will send more nutrients to their kin, but they still send nutrients to the neighboring little seedlings as well. It's almost like a network. It's almost like if you had a parent on the block and all the friends were playing, and, like, it was time to get dark, you just don't call your own kid in, you call everybody in.
Yeah.
But your kid's coming inside. Yeah.
That's so
It's
cool.
it is super cool. It is super cool. Okay, so those networks, they're made of that microscopic filament called mycelium. And if you can imagine, a mushroom is the fruit of the fungus. The mycelium is the body of that fungus, thread-like structures that spread throughout the soil. So these threads attach themselves to the roots of the trees and plants, forming relationships called the mycorrhizal. So that's why we get the mycorrhizal network. In their research, they have seen that this relationship is ancient. It is over 400 million years old. And through this partnership, the fungal plants exchange their resources. And the fungal networks extend outward through the soil, dramatically increasing the surface area available. So they expand over the surface area, like right under the ground, to gather as much water and minerals like nitrogen and phosphorus. The fungi deliver these nutrients to the tree. In exchange, the tree provides that fungi with the sugar produced through photosynthesis. So it's almost like a team. So if you have a mushroom and we have the mycelium here and we have a tree here and a tree here, they're interconnecting. They're all linking. So this tree is sending something here, this fungal. It's just amazing. It's super cool. With that exchange, that's not the only thing that happens, not the only benefit with this mycelium and this mycorrhizal network but what they can actually do is connect multiple trees. That's how, like, if you think of a root system of a tree, if you think the top, just think of how wide that is and expand that out about 3 or 4 times. That's about how far the roots will go on a tree. But this mycelium network or this mycorrhizal network will expand it beyond that, and that's when it's connecting to almost all forests. So everyone's communicating. You could see, like, first you can see the research is amazing. They were able to map it out of who's all connected. It it's brilliant.
It reminds me, I think wasn't there one of the documentaries? I think I've watched one about not about the trees, but about fungus, and I remember them talking about that. It was on Netflix for a while,
Yeah.
but they compared it, I think if I remember correctly, to the nervous system, almost like that the fungus act similar to, like, nerves, but it sounds to me almost like fascia even, like the fascial structure of the human body where the fascia overlays and interconnects everything, like it's considered one unit, but from what you're describing, it sounds like it's just all-encompassing, which is really freaking cool.
Yeah, and you can go out into, like, the next time you go out into, like, a forest or a wooded area, look under the dirt because you will see this mycorrhizal network, and it's literally centimeters underneath the soil. So if you move it, you'll start seeing it, and you can just see, like, it's all right there, and if you think it's expanding all
Well,
forests.
and I know that for me, because I live near some trees, and I know that when like, near wood, like, near a small patch of woods, but when I've planted stuff, like, kinda close to the border, definitely the soil when pulling it out, it's really interesting how many roots have come over even though it appears so far away, and just how the soil is all kinda interlaced together or, like, knitted together type of thing. It's just fascinating.
Yeah, it is fascinating. Like, today we're talking about, like, the trees and the mycorrhizal network, but plants have the same thing. Plants have their own mycorrhizal network that interconnects them. And it's like, when you go to a tree sometimes or out in a wooded area and there could be not like any plants around, but if you just look under and you start pulling these little and you think they're actually roots of the tree, but, like, that's not. That is the mycorrhizal. What the scientists and the ecological researchers have saying, like, this is the forest's internet, kind of like how it just spans out. So, and we had already talked about this a little bit. I touched point on it as mother trees.
Mhm.
So Susan Simard, I kind of mentioned her earlier. She is an author of a book called Finding the Mother Tree. And she's also on a documentary I watch. It's called Intelligent Trees. I could watch that over and over. But, like, in her research, there was even a more fascinating role, and it's called mother trees. So what the mother trees are is they are usually the largest and they're the oldest tree in the forest. So because of their age and their size, they have extensive root systems. How I said, that canopy, like, the bigger they are, that's how further out they're going. So in that root system, and they're connected to hundreds and sometimes thousands of other trees throughout that mycorrhizal network. And these mother trees function as that central hub within that forest. Through this network, that the mother trees distribute carbon and nutrients to the surrounding trees, especially to their young seedlings that are growing in their shade. In Simard's research, she even suggested that mother trees can recognize their own, and the mother trees they send additional carbons to their offspring, and they help them grow and establish themselves. But she can also notice if something's happening, if something's not right. Even she could have seedlings further away, and she can sense, like, not she, just the mother tree can sense if her seedlings may be in danger, if there's a drought in that area, and almost have an understanding if that seedling's going to survive. If not, going to give more nutrients to a seedling that is knowing have a better possibility of survival. It's fascinating, fascinating. So in Samar's research, she did experiments, and she was using carbon isotopes, and the researchers were observing those parent trees would send additional carbon to their own seedlings through that fungal network, where I was kind of mentioning they were capable of like preferentially supporting their own young, but still giving some to the neighboring seedlings. So they still were interconnected with that family. Another thing she had noticed is when trees experience that stress, perhaps like I had mentioned earlier, insect attacks or drought, it can increase those chemical signals that travel through that mycorrhizal network. So the neighboring trees will receive these signals and begin activating their defenses, or if they know if there is a drought coming, retain their own nutrients. It allows them to save their resources. And in that mycorrhizal network, it's like warnings are transmitted. The young trees are supported by the older generations, and trees can communicate even through the air. How brilliant. For example, when a certain trees are attacked by insects, they release airborne chemicals that nearby trees detect, allowing them to prepare their own defenses. And a single tree growing alone in a forest is more vulnerable in that environment as compared to trees that are growing in forests where they have access to that entire network support beneath them. So like when you can see in forests when they started doing clear cutting, what they'll do is clear cut, almost destroyed that whole area. Because more than likely you took the mother tree that was actually the hub to have a support network for the rest of them.
Yeah, haven't they changed that now where with some of the stuff that they'll look for and identify the mother trees?
In some
'Cause I've
areas
heard
they
of
are.
that. Some are trying to be better about
Yeah, some are because if we continue taking that's why in Germany, where, the researcher Wolleben has that beech forest where it's pretty much intact from its original, that's very rare now to have an actual because 80% of Germany was a beech tree forest like that, and it is no longer. So that's why they're trying to preserve it because it's ancient. It's hundreds of thousands of years old. Could you imagine what's underneath of that? So it's going to take hundreds of years to even grow another mother tree, that kind of a network, and growing their own species, different species, I should say, instead of sometimes in clear cutting, what they would do is clear cut a forest. It could have been birch, it could have been pine, it could have been anything, all different varieties. But when they'll clear cut is they would come through and just plant whatever they had that was the easiest to plant. And it could be like a pine.
easiest and cheapest.
Yeah, easiest and cheapest. And now we're only introducing tiny pine trees with no network underneath to communicate. So they're not going to be hurt. They're not going to be hardy. Like you can tell you can tell where you've been when you walk into a forest to see if it has ever been harvested by man, because they're going to be puny little ones, and they're going to be weak, and they're not going to be any big trees around, and they're not going to be the strongest wood or the sturdiest wood because they are now trying to fight to survive with no network, no communication, no one helping one another. I mean, helping because everyone is like, what do we do now? We're trying to survive. So yeah, you can see it. Like I noticed that last night. I'm like, wow, it's so fascinating. So I was talking a little bit about clear cutting. So when those forests are heavily clear cutted, what happens is those underground networks, they will get destroyed because, like I said, they're just centimeters, if not millimeters below our foot. So even like when we walk into forest, we are walking on that, and it's so delicate that heavy machinery actually destroys that mycorrhizal network in there. Because if you see those big tire marks, they can go into the ground at least a foot or 2 foot, and that's what's clearing those trees. So now how are we even going to even try and reproduce a new mycorrhizal system by planting new trees? Because if you think of dirt is not compact and dense or compact. It's kind of fluffy. That's how it's intended to be. So everything can grow through there. But if we have that heavy machinery, it's just compacting it. Even if we planted a mycorrhizal network there, it would not grow because it can't. It's too compact. So that, like I said, that destruction with the machinery, it breaks down that communication. And the trees there, like I said, their risk of survival is is bleak. So we'll go back to when they were clear cutting. I
Mhm.
could not have done that for a living. My heart breaks when I hear a chainsaw. So when they would come in and clear cut and they plant the little ones, it's like it would not build the strong trees again. Because what they'll do is they'll just plant new trees, they'll grow, and in, I don't even know, 10 years, they'll come and clear cut it again, which is not beneficial. If they would have just left the mother tree and left some seedlings, pick sparingly instead of clear cutting. Because those forests, they take hundreds of years to mature. And the towering trees we admire today, they're starved. They're starved for nutrients. And now they're starved to feed their seedlings.
It's interesting because from what you're describing with the network, isn't there a thing where when you go into the woods, introduce yourself to the border trees? Have you heard of that before?
No, but I like that.
Yeah. So whenever you're going on a hike or on the trail, introduce yourself to the border tree or the trees that are right beside the trail that you're about to walk on. I've heard of that. I've also heard of, depending how you introduce yourself to the border tree or to the trees at the front of that trail, all the other trees are going to know about you as you're walking through. So I've heard of that.
I like that.
Like, imagine if we're like plucking leaves and tearing. I mean, I did that as a kid, I'll be honest, because I was
I think we all
fascinated with,
did.
right? Fascinated with those leaf veins. But I mean, if you're going in there like tearing off limbs and all that stuff, it's like they're going to know about you as you're walking your way through.
They're gonna be like,
They
danger,
know.
danger, danger. Or, hey, we got a good one. They love us. They're just coming to see
Yeah.
our beauty. Yep.
Well, and I've heard another thing. I don't know, or have you ever heard the thing of tell the trees who's wronged you? Mhm. So apparently that's a thing where if you have a grievance or something, you go and tell a tree about it.
Super cool.
Yeah.
So it's like you're sharing, and it's
Yeah.
almost like they keep that for
You're
themselves.
sharing it? Yeah. So just letting them know what happened, and I guess depending, like, if they figure out the person, maybe they'll trip them with a root or something.
They're like, whoop, I'm gonna drop a twig.
Right.
All right. So almost like humans, they or not almost like humans, but yeah, kind of like humans, like in how we live, is resilience does not always come from standing alone. It comes from that connection. Just like the trees in the forest, humans are deeply interconnected. We rely on relationships and communities, shared knowledge, and support systems to help us navigate life's challenges. And just like the mycorrhizal network beneath the soil, many of the systems that support us are invisible. Another lesson trees offer us is patience. Trees grow slow, and a forest that feels ancient today may have taken hundreds of years to become what it is. Yet, the slower growth is part of the strength. Trees that grow too quickly often develop weaker wood and shorter lifespans. But trees that grow gradually develop defense, resilient structures capable of surviving storms for centuries. So, in the world that often pressures us to grow quickly, to achieve quickly, to solve everything immediately, trees remind us that lasting growth often unfolds slowly. So, season by season, year by year, there is also a wisdom in how trees respond to hardship. Storms bend their branches, weather strips away their leaves, drought stresses their roots, but the tree adapts. Growth pauses when conditions are difficult, energy shifts towards survival, and when conditions improve, growth resumes. Resilience does not come from avoiding hardship. It means adapting, conserving energy when needed, and trusting the natural cycle of life. And perhaps the most profound lesson from the forest is that life thrives through cooperation. The idea that a stronger survival by dominating others is not the full story. In forest survival often depends on relationships, on communication, on sharing resources, on networks of mutual support. The forest thrives together. And when we spend time in these environments, our bodies often respond. So, studies in environmental psychology and physiology have shown that time spent in the forest can lower stress hormones, reduce blood pressure, and activate the parasympathetic nervous system. the part of our nervous system responsible for rest, recovery, and healing. So the rhythm of nature regulates us. Our nervous system evolved in these environments. And the sound of the wind, the birds singing along, filtered sunlight, the organic patterns just out in the wild, signify safety to our body. So when we walk through the forest, we are not just observing nature, we are participating in an environment our biology recognizes. And perhaps that is why so many people feel that sense of calm and clarity, of emotional release when they spend time among trees. The forest is not just a scenery, it is a living system that we are part of. In closing today, may we reflect on the wisdom of the forest, that beneath the soil, millions of delicate mycelia threads weave throughout the ground, connecting the tree roots in every direction, an invisible web of support and communication. So just like the trees, you are rooted in a larger web of life. You are supported by a network of connections, some visible and some unseen. So the wisdom of trees remind us that, again, resilience is not about standing alone. It's about deep roots and shared support and trusting that the networks that sustain life beneath the surface. And so, yeah, so if this something resonates with you, I encourage you to spend time outside and just walk through the forest if you can, or just sit by a tree and just observe and notice their patience and notice their strengths. And remember that beneath that surface of the natural world is that incredible web of support.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Go tree bathing, y'all.
Yes.
They call it tree bathing. Have you heard of that?
Yeah.
And I think you're wearing an amazing shirt. Did you plan that?
Stay wild. You know,
So
I put it on this morning. This is actually my Arbor Day. I got it from the Arbor Day
yeah.
Foundation.
So it says stay wild, but the eye shows a tree instead.
Yeah. Stay
It's
wild.
perfect.
Yes. It's like understanding that we are more connected with nature than not connected.
Well, and it goes to show how often those patterns are. Like the patterns that we see in trees are patterns for a ideal way for communities to act and for civilizations to act. So yeah,
We,
those
you
and
know,
for our
how,
bodies, like
yeah.
our internal systems, it would be beneficial if it acted similarly as well.
Yeah. Where we just connected and communicated and looked out for everything, everyone. Kind of like how the trees do. They don't, there's not, the trees don't, they just unconditionally take care of one another, no matter what species, no matter their age. It could be a seedling. Yeah. They look out for one another for their survival, no matter what species.
Well, thank y'all so much for listening to Sacred Axis, a space for the whimsically divine.